Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our final Word in Black event for this year. My name is Andrew Ramsamy, and I am Chief Content and Collaboration Officer with Word in Black and LMA, the organization that is the managing partner of this event. I wanted to tell you a little bit about Word in Black before we begin. Word in Black is a groundbreaking collaboration of the nation's leading Black-owned news publishers. Word in Black promises to confront inequities, elevate solutions, and amplify the Black experience by reporting, collecting, and sharing stories about real people in communities across our country. With these 10 publishers joining forces and providing a platform to examine these experiences in one place, we can shape how the nation understands and addresses systemic issues of race, justice, and equity. It is through the collective lens of understanding that we bring about collective impact. I would invite you to join our weekly newsletter, which many of you are here today because of our newsletter, by visiting wordinblack.com and clicking on newsletter. And you can also support Word in Black by becoming one of our founding members by visiting wordinblack.com and clicking on the donate button. We are grateful to the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative for supporting the work of Word in Black. And all of our publishers in this collaborative are laser focused on fostering solutions to racial inequities in America. And that begins with K-12 education. Like I said, this is our final event of 2021, and it comes at a timely moment. Our guest tonight, incoming New York City Schools Chancellor David Banks, who will be joined by our moderator, Elinor Tatum, publisher of the New York Amsterdam News and seed planter for Word in Black. Our topic this evening, teachers of color in classroom, the state of equity in K-12 education. After our conversation with David and Elinor, I'll be joined by Aswad Walker, Associate Editor of the Defender Network, Houston's leading Black news information source, and a member of our Word in Black News Collaborative. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Elinor, who will introduce David and get this evening started. Elinor.
Thank you so much, Andrew, and welcome to this evening's webinar. David, well, first of all, congratulations, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. David Banks is the president. Currently, David Banks is the president and CEO of the Eagle Academy Foundation and the founding principal of the Eagle Academy for Young Men, the first school in a network of innovative all-boys public schools in New York City. David is a graduate of Rutgers University in New Brunswick, New Jersey, and received his Juris Doctorate from St. John's University Law School in 2014. And in 2014, David Banks was chosen as one of the 7 Black male achievement social innovators nationwide by the Leadership and Sustainability Institute for demonstrating tangible results in improving the life outcomes of African-American boys and men. David was a member of the board of directors for the International Boys School Coalition. In May 2014, David was awarded an honorary doctorate degree from Wheelock College. And just last week, he was named New York City Schools Chancellor. Did you ever think that you would be leading the country's largest school system and have the top education job in the country?
Did I ever think it? Did I ever imagine it? Sure. I mean, I think anybody who's been a good school leader is surrounded by teachers and kids and parents who would say, you'd make a great chancellor one day. And I see one of the people that's put something in the chat is Tamika Howes. Tamika was one of my students at my first school that I was the principal of, the Bronx School for Law, Government, and Justice, where I had some of my best years. And Tamika was just an awesome, amazing young lady. I'm glad to see that she's in this conversation tonight. But I say that all the time. When people ask, did you ever imagine that you would ever be in a place? Of course. I mean, if you can't imagine, it's not that you necessarily predicted that you'd be there, but imagine, oh, absolutely. And that's what I've always done throughout my career. I've encouraged young people to imagine the greatest of heights for their own lives. If you can't imagine it, then you certainly have no business even going after it. You have to get it in your mind's eye first. And so And so, yes, absolutely. I wasn't planning on becoming the chancellor, that's for sure. And the mayor-elect Eric Adams came to me to ask me to do this. And so here I am, and eager and excited to take on this great challenge.
I mean, I know that over the years, we've talked about education so much. And I think we've even had that conversation that one day you would be chancellor, and, you know, that day is finally coming. So again, you know, a hearty congratulations. I'm looking forward to great things, you know,
Thank you.
but David, you know, you're taking this over at a time where we're in the midst of a crisis. The most recent, you know, we've got the pandemic, the murder of George Floyd. We've got a divisive period of political history. How do you look at the role of education in the midst of all these challenges? And what's going to be your strategy to make sure that education doesn't get caught up in the fray?
Listen, crisis challenge has never caused me to shy away. It's part of what I've done throughout my whole career. I've leaned into spaces where others would say, you know, why in the world would you do that? It's such a great challenge. The creation of the Eagle Academy in and of itself was created as a response to the great challenge that was facing African-American and Latino males throughout our school system. Columbia University put out a report that said that 75% of the inmates from the entire state of New York were coming from 7 neighborhoods in New York City, and overwhelmingly African-American and Latino males. The graduation rate when we started Eagle was 32%. People said, why in the world would you try to lean in on that? Because that's not where most people were, but we leaned in on it because the need was there. And we said, listen, you know, why not us? Somebody's got to do it. And so as I look at this school system, the way it's currently constructed, there's tremendous crisis throughout the country and in our communities, and certainly within the school system. And I don't think you can rebuild New York unless you rebuild our school system simultaneously. And so I have great confidence that Mayor-elect Eric Adams is going to do all that he can to rebuild the city and get our economy back, and so many other things that need to be done. But I'll be doing my absolute best to try and rebuild the school system in spite of all of the challenges that are around us. And in many ways, some of these tragedies have lifted the consciousness of young people, and really should be instructive for what our school system should be producing anyway, right? So it's not that we don't want our young people to be in the fray. We don't want them to be caught up completely in politics, but we want them to develop their social justice muscle, right? Like our school system should be producing young people who are aware of what is going on in the communities around them. Schools exist to be part of the communities. And I think oftentimes our schools are kept in silos, and our young people have no idea what's going on. They don't know how to activate. They come out. There's a reason why so many Americans just continue not to vote, not to be engaged civically, because we don't build that muscle in the K-12 space. I want to see young people involved in student government. I want to hear their voice expressed around the issues of the day. They should be engaged around things that are relevant to their own lives, so that we're developing them to be engaged citizens. That's what we should be doing. And so while the challenges are many, not only in New York City, around the country, and in fact, around the world, my goal is to help young people to be ready to take their rightful place in society and help to provide the answers that we need.
Now, part of the key to this is the people that are standing in front of our students in the classroom, our teachers. And all too often, we don't have teachers that actually look like our students. What role do you think that actually plays in a city that is so diverse? Is it important for the teachers to reflect the student populations that they're teaching?
Oh, absolutely. It's important for that to happen. I mean, all of the research tells us that how much better off young people of color are when they see teachers who look like them, who stand before them as teachers. It's critically important. It's really important that they see more male teachers across the country. Men of color are only, particularly African-American males, are only represented by 2% of the teaching population, 2%. So if you're a young man of color, it's very likely that you will never see a male of color who looks, just like you in the school system. For little girls who are growing up of color, it's important to be able to see. It's affirming. Identity development is really important as part of the overall development of a young person. And if you never see anybody who looks like you, if you never see anybody who has similar experiences and background to you, that's problematic. Doesn't mean that you can't learn at all. You can, but it's made so much better when you've got people that we can relate to. I had a teacher when I was in the 4th and 5th grade. She wasn't my regular classroom teacher. She taught Black history. Her name was Mildred Scott. And to this day, Ellie, I will tell you, she was the most impactful teacher that I ever had in my life. She taught me about the people who came before me, that I stood on the shoulders of the people who fought, bled, died, and sacrificed so that I could be here, and that I had a responsibility to my community to be all that I could possibly be. When you hear that from someone who looks like you, who looks like your mother, who looks like your grandmother, it matters. And so we need to continue to diversify our teaching core. We need to continue to create ways for our young people to even want to become teachers, and if we're not graduating them from high school, the pool is very limited for how many would actually come back to actually be teachers. In South Korea, they call teachers nation builders. They gain the highest respect of any profession in the country. That's not the way we have treated our teachers here in America. And I think for all teachers, we need to do a much better job of lifting them up, celebrating them, honoring them for the work that they do on behalf of our children. Everybody who goes on to any level of success in any career has teachers that they can point to who help them along the way.
Now, at the Eagle Academies, you had a pretty good track record of having teachers of color and particularly male teachers of color, didn't you?
We sure did. And I will tell you, it wasn't because of any intentional strategies that we put in place per se. I think what we did was we were able to promote the work that we were doing and the mission of Eagle, and people were drawn to us. So anytime I was in the media and people got a chance to see and hear about Eagle Academy, there was no shortage of people, particularly men, who said, I want to be part of that. I was that young man who grew up with never had a male teacher. And now, that I am a teacher, I want to be part of the Eagle Academy and help these young brothers in their journey. And then there are a lot of the people who actually work in our schools. They're so passion driven. They recruit the other people to come to the schools because they're like, this is a good place to be. You're going to be supported. And we've got a real mission here. We're not just going through the routine of going to school every day. We're saving these young men, and in doing so, we're saving ourselves. It's part of the ethos of what Eagle is all about. There's an energy and a spirit behind it.
So how does that energy get replicated so that you can get more Black men, more men of color into teaching in the New York City school system, more teachers of color in general, so that the teaching population can start to reflect more the student population that we have in New York City?
Well, first of all, there are a couple of things that we have to do. One, we have to incentivize it. We got to promote it. We got to market it. We got to tell people of color that they are valued here and we want them. So what does that mean? That means we should be traveling all around the country and going to schools and universities. We should go to the HBCUs on a regular basis and state our case about why it's important. And we'd love to have them to come here to be teachers in our schools. It's not enough to just sit back and think everybody just should come. You got to go out there and you got to recruit. And you got to make the pitch and sell New York City, right? Why it would be great to come to a place like New York and be a teacher. And so I think some of those efforts are happening already in New York. They've got a program called New York NYC Men Teach, which was meant to do just that. I think it's had some success, but I think it's a body of work that we could take to the next level. for sure. But more importantly, I think what we got to do is we got to help graduate more of our young people so that they are eligible. You know, you can't become a teacher if you've never graduated from high school and college. And so we've got to increase that pool in the first place. So that we got to do all of this simultaneously.
Well, that's a heavy lift. But I mean, you know, getting these teachers to first get in the door and then to get more of our kids graduated, it's a chicken and egg kind of thing.
It is.
Which comes first. But then we do have some teachers that are here, but how do we keep those? You know, diverse teachers have increased nationally over the last 15 years a bit, but teachers of color tend to leave the districts and the profession in higher rates than white teachers. At this point, do you have any plans to try to retain teachers of color? Is there anything?
Absolutely.
Can you share those with us yet, or are they still in the works?
Well, it's all still in the works. I'm not even in the office yet, right? But just the idea is not just, so recruitment is part of the strategy, but retention is just as important. Makes no sense to recruit folks to come here, and then after a year or two, they're leaving. The investment that you're making in them, it does not prove to be fruitful, right? And so I think one of the things that that's important is, who do you connect those teachers with? That's really important. That's some of the things that we've done at Eagle. You've got to assign them to mentor teachers, you know, teachers who've been around, you know, experienced teachers who can help show them the ropes. And you've got to have what I call credible messengers, you know, people who have similar lived experiences to them, who can have informal, you know, conversations and get-togethers where, you know, we get a chance to, you know, behind the scenes say, boy, this stuff is hard. And to learn from those who've gone through it already, who will show you the way. You know, the teachers who will look back and say, when I was in my first year, it was a disaster, and here are the mistakes that I made, and here's what I learned, and here are the suggestions that will help you. I think those kinds of things are really important. When you put people in the classroom and just leave them on their own and say, hey, good luck, that's a recipe for losing teachers. But if you really want to retain them, you have to have a real intentional program that says, we value you, we're going to give you the professional development that you need. And ultimately, people have to feel a level of success. You know, if they feel like, I can't do this job, it's just too hard. Kids are running amok, you're not getting support. Those are the reasons why teachers leave. Teachers don't leave when they feel supported. When they feel supported and they feel successful, then they feel like, you know, this is a worthwhile career for me. And so our job has to be to help get them to that place.
When you say professional development, and, you know, so many times they'll talk to teachers and they'll say, you know, the professional development that they give us, you know, feels like a waste of time. I don't feel like we're actually getting anything that we can actually bring back to our classrooms that's going to help our students.
Sure.
But the things that you've just talked about, where you're actually talking to your peers, actually seems to make sense. So
let me tell you something. As an example, when I say professional development, I don't mean it in the purest sense or the traditional sense, where a lot of teachers say, you know, it was just a lot of humdrum stuff. I didn't really learn anything. You know, I'll give you an example. Eagle Academy in Brooklyn has more Black male teachers at that school than any school in New York City. Why? Very intentional about making that happen, right? So a couple of times a week after school day is done. All these brothers get together in a room. They got music on, they've got food, and they come in a circle, and it's like being in a barbershop, and they have real talk. And that's a form of professional development that you generally won't see. and when I say real talk, I mean, you got young teachers and they're like, Kadeem is driving me absolutely crazy, and I can't get through to him. And then you have a teacher who's been around for 5 years who said, I had kids like Kadeem when I was in my first year, and this is how you have to connect with Kadeem. You got to sit with him at lunchtime. You got to meet him one day. You got to go to his house and meet his grandma. and spend an hour doing things like that can make all the difference in the world. When Kadeem sees you outside of the boundaries of school, and it's the kind of thing that you're not going to hear that in a traditional professional development session. But that's being real and making cultural connections with kids and their families. It makes all the difference in the world. And so that's the real kind of stuff that I'm talking about. That when you do those things and you really connect with teachers, that's how you recruit them. That's how you retain them. But you got to know how to put those pieces in place.
Now, we all know that day one for you on the job doesn't start for a few more weeks, but it already seems like it started. So what do you want to accomplish as chancellor in your first 100 days, or what do you want to what do you feel that what will make you feel that you have been successful as being chancellor?
I want to see a renewed energy. I want to see a renewed focus really in our schools. I want to see young people who are on their way to success in life and careers, whether they decide to go to college or not. One of the things that we're going to be doing that's going to be a North Star, there are two things I will tell you that you will hear us say over and over and over again: bright starts and bold futures. We're going to make significant investments in early childhood. We're going to change the way our teachers are actually teaching reading in our schools. Over the last 25 years, a lot of our kids have been doing balanced literacy. I don't think balanced literacy has worked for the majority of our children, particularly Black and brown children. It has not worked. We're going to get back to the phonetic approach to the teaching of reading, because there's a reason why 65% of Black and brown kids never achieve proficiency. They're not learning to read in the way that you and I did, Ellie, years ago. I know you're much younger than me, but the reality is that, our schools have gotten away from the kind of the core way of that kids need to learn to read. So we're gonna be changing those things there in the early grades. Every child must learn to read by the third grade. Period. Point blank. Full stop. If that doesn't happen, we have to spend that much more money fighting an uphill battle down the line. And so my intention is to lean in so that no matter what else happens, our kids are going to know how to read. I consider that the ultimate equity issue. And so that's something we're going to be totally committed to. But then down the line, middle school, high school, we want to reform how they're experiencing schools, experiencing their school day. I want kids to be exposed to corporations. I want kids to be exposed to various careers so that they know, what the power of possibility is for their lives. There's a reason why so many kids check out of school early, because they're bored. They don't even know why they go to school in the first place. And we don't give them good answers. And I want to give them good answers. I want to see kids on fire to learn, because they know the light at the end of the tunnel. They see it. They know what it means and what it potentially represents for their own lives. And I want our parents and our families to understand that and to recognize it. So there are lots of things that we're going to be looking to do, but I would tell you, bright starts, bold futures, that's going to be the major, core changes that you're going to see. And there's just a lot of stuff that we have to fix. We've got to fix special education. We've got to fix our enrollment processes. There's just so many areas that are just broken and dysfunctional. So we'll be spending a lot of time trying to get those things right.
You mentioned, when I was growing up, and, when I was growing up, there were a lot of things that were also broken. There were a lot of things that were also right. But one of the things that was broken was, when it came to students with special needs, students that had learning disabilities. I have dyslexia.
That's right.
I didn't learn to read till it was very late because of the
Wow.
fact that I had a learning disability, and they didn't know
Look
how
at
to
that.
teach kids with learning disabilities. And, some teachers still don't know how to teach kids with learning disabilities.
Many
But
don't. Most don't.
yeah, most don't. And so, that is an issue that hasn't changed from the 1970s.
And I'm going to be committed, Ellie, to changing that. I went to visit just today the Wynwood School, which is probably the preeminent school in New York City and maybe one of the best in the country in teaching kids with dyslexia. They're a private school, mostly, white and upper middle class and wealthy kids. who have the opportunity to go to that school. It's phenomenal. It has changed kids' lives. But we met with them because we want to partner with them to help us at the Department of Education figure out the best strategies for teaching kids who have learning disabilities and dyslexia very specifically. We don't do a good job with that in the DOE at all. And so I want to learn from people who are doing it well. You should not have to be white and wealthy to learn how to read. And so those are the challenges that we face, and those are the things we're going to be committed to fixing.
And you know, for me, it was my first grade teacher who was a Black woman who said to my parents, you know, Ellie is smart,
Right.
but she can't read. And we need to figure out why that is. And that's the only reason why I got diagnosed with dyslexia when I did, was because
Wow.
she cared enough.
Wow.
In that same school, a few years later, I had a teacher who just said that I was stupid and I would never amount to anything.
Oh.
But
Oh.
it was that teacher, that Black teacher, who told me and told my parents that we have to fix this. We have to figure out how to make me successful.
Yes.
And that made all the difference in the world. So
Yes.
with that, David, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And thank you for all the work that you've done with the Eagle Academy. And we are looking forward to seeing what you do with the New York City school system.
Thank
Congratulations.
you.
And
Thank you.
we're looking for great years ahead. Incoming Chancellor of the New York City school system, David Banks. Thank you. And I'm going to throw it back to Andrew Ramsamy. Congratulations, David.
Thank you. Take care. Have a great night.
Congratulations,
You
David.
too.
I'm a proud product of the New York City Board of Education, PS 19, IS 61, and LaGuardia High School. So I would not be sitting here today if I didn't have the education that I got from New York, and I'm rooting for you to succeed in your new role. So if you need someone to come to New York and cheer you up, I'm here in Arizona, but not far away. I appreciate your time this evening.
And through technology, we can have you talk to hundreds and thousands of kids, and you don't even have to leave your living room.
Unbelievable. If you had said to me I'd have 3 Emmy Awards behind me, I would have never have guessed it. So, but that's all because of everything I learned in New York and because of great teachers. And back to Elinor, I actually had my first kindergarten teacher was Black. And when I got home from school, my mom asked me, what did my teacher look like? And I said chocolate. So
yes, come on. Yes.
Representation is important. And I can't wait. I can't wait. Yes. I'm really excited for you. So congratulations, best of luck. And New York City's waiting for you.
Yes. Yes. And I'm ready for them. Take good care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. So with that, we're going to move along. Elinor, thank you so much. If you want to stay for our roundtable discussion, reporters roundtable discussion, you may, but I'm going to ask Aswad Walker to join us. Aswad, if you're there, turn your video on. Aswad is the associate editor of the Houston Defender Network, one of our partner publishers in Word in Black, along with Elinor with the New York Amsterdam News. And Aswad, what did you think about what David had to say?
I was kind of mad about the fact I couldn't get involved in the conversation. I've heard so much about this brother. In fact, I heard him mentioned by Jeffrey Johnson, I can't remember his name, on the Ricky Smiley Morning Show, and he was just raving about the work that this brother has done with his particular schools, and now that he's the leader of the largest school system in the country, man, that's promising.
Elinor, it seems like that a lot of these new ideas have come outside of traditional education, right? A lot of charter schools have been led by people of color, men of color, attacking this education issue from the charter school perspective and different paths. What do you think David is going to face once he enters into the maelstrom of the New York City public schools and the city in terms of what it's hoping for? What do you think he's going to be facing, Ellie?
Well, you've got to remember that the Eagle Academies are public schools. They are not charter schools. They are public schools. So he has been in the public school system the entire time. And so I I think because of the type of public schools that he helped to create and that he fostered, and he had, as he said, people that just flocked towards it, teachers that flocked towards it. I think there may be people that actually flock towards teaching again because he is leading the public school system. And if that happens, I think we're going to get a crop of teachers that are going to be coming in that are really going to believe in the education system again. At least that's what I hope we're going to see. And they're going to start looking at education differently. And I'm hoping that he's going to frame the whole, frame education in New York in a new way and hopefully reimagine it. And if he can do that, I think it will kind of be turned on its head, and we can maybe rebuild what has been lost in education here. And there'd be a good chance that we can start to make it much stronger again, because right now, there are a lot of issues, and there's some phenomenal teachers out there and there's some phenomenal principals, but there are also some that are not so great, and there's some schools that are downright horrible, but there are some that are downright wonderful, and they serve some of the poorest communities and some of the richest communities, but we have to have a system that is equitable, that is serving all of the communities equally, and that we don't have some schools that are completely underfunded and other schools that are, have millions of dollars in their coffers and, can do whatever they want, while there's another school that doesn't even have a gym, doesn't have a library, and doesn't have arts. That just shouldn't happen in a city like New York, and it does every day.
And while New York City is the largest school system in the US, Texas is the largest influencer when it comes to mandating education mandates. Textbooks get written around what Texas has to offer. Aswad, what's your perspective on what you think David is going to face, and what role do you think Texas might play in how we begin to see whether or not there are going to be more teachers of color in the classroom?
First of all, I want Elinor's positive outlook. That's what I want. And I'm hoping what she says come to pass. I'm reflecting on the school superintendent here in the state of Texas, a brother, who was the superintendent of a predominantly white district, basically run out of his job because of attacks that he was promoting critical race theory. And so when you talk about Texas being an influencer, that's the negative influence that I see potentially coming his way. But I do need to say that I haven't met the brother. It was my first time actually seeing him and listening to him. And he strikes me as someone who, and you can quote me on this, ain't scared, with a emphasis on the ain't part. He doesn't look like he's going to back down to any of that kind of nonsense. And just in hearing him and reading about the successes that he's had, I'm inclined to agree with Elinor Tatum that we could see the dysfunction turned on its head and see a brighter day up there.
So we began the new year 2021 with schools trying to return to some sense of normalcy. A lot of people looked to New York, and New York was in the national headlines in terms of how they were planning on returning to schools. Elinor, what do you think the plan has been? Has it been a successful plan? And what do you think David's inheriting from that plan?
Well, I mean, I think it's still, I think the verdict is still out. My daughter is in the 6th grade. Her classroom has not been closed yet. Within her school, which is a middle school, several classrooms have been closed or partially closed. Her grade, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders are now eligible for the vaccine. Many of them have gotten it. Many of them have not gotten it. I don't really know what the numbers are. They haven't actually shared those numbers with us. So I don't even know if a child in her class did get exposed to COVID, what that ratio of what that classroom would look like. Would it close completely? Would it be partially closed? Would the kids go into quarantine? Because, you know, those guidelines change constantly. I think we will see after Christmas what happens, because after people are going home or traveling to see family and friends over a holiday, numbers tend to crop up or creep up when it comes to COVID. So we'll see what that really looks like. But New York City has also said that they're not going to be doing remote education the same way that they did it during the height of the pandemic last year. You know, it was all going to be asynchronous instead of synchronous learning. The kids don't have laptops and iPads going home with them anymore. And so they're not prepared the same way. The teachers are not prepared the same way. So I don't know what it would look like. So far, it's been all right. But I don't know what it will look like going forward. I am hoping that everyone will be able to stay in school and that the kids will be safe. But again, you know, it's still not too cold for the kids to be sitting outside to have lunch. They're not all crammed into a lunchroom. But only time can tell. You know, I mean, he's getting the schools in the middle of winter. So, you know, who knows what other problems will present themselves. Hopefully not too many.
You know, Texas made that same pronouncement about we're not going to do any virtual learning. All the children need to be back in the classrooms. And a lot of parents and educators thought that that was literally a willingness to sacrifice the lives of those children, or the well-being of those children and the educators in the classroom. But something amazing happened even while Governor Abbott and Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick were playing politics with people's lives. Parents, educators, school superintendents drew a line in the sand and said, no, you say we can't wear masks, we're wearing masks anyway. You say we can't have virtual learning, but we have students that aren't coming to school and you need to make it happen. And so I was encouraged by the courage and the willingness to stand up for the safety of those children and those teachers in the classroom that I saw here in Texas. And it wasn't just here in Houston, it was all across the state, Austin, Dallas, San Antonio, and other places. But the challenges, as you say, the challenges still remain because we have a pandemic that is still raging, and our level of it seems as though we're living in a post-pandemic time, at least in our minds, when it's still actually impacting people's lives.
And Aswad, there in Texas, not only did you guys have the pandemic this past winter, but then you also had the terrible snowstorm and weather that literally blacked out the state of Texas. What do you think it has to say about the infrastructure of the state of Texas, plus the fact that, again, it's one of the largest schools, school districts and schools in terms of size and population? How ready is Texas for the next crisis?
Texas is not ready for the next crisis. I mean, there have been reports that say that by absolutely no means or measure is the state of Texas ready. If another cold snap hits us like it did last year, researchers have said, be ready for the same madness. And you asked me a few seconds ago, what does this mean? What does this whole thing mean for Texas with the cold snap? Well, it means that politics is very lucrative for some people because those individuals who refused to monitor and regulate the energy providers received big money campaign donations from those people to make sure that they were hands off. And that hands off approach to regulation, or a better way of saying it is no regulation at all, meant that our lives and our well-being was put at risk. And it impacted everyone, but it impacted people of color. Mostly, we didn't get this information until months and months and months later, but it was almost like a rolling blackout, with the blackouts coming to the Black and brown communities. So even in a situation where everyone is negatively impacted, Black and brown people were still impacted even more. Did that answer your question? I
Yeah.
want to make sure I'm answering. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ellie, again, New York is getting a lot of national attention because it not only will be having a new incoming New York City schools chancellor, but it also will be having a new mayor with Eric Adams. Eric Adams is a very unique mayor for New York City. He'll be the second Black mayor in New York City, but also comes from a background of law enforcement. And we've seen a lot of stories around law enforcement in schools. What do you think? What do you think might happen there with Eric Adams stepping into that role, and then obviously with David now becoming the new chancellor of New York City?
Well, I think we've got two very different approaches there. I mean, there is the law and order approach that you would think you might have coming from someone that was in law enforcement. And you've got David Banks, who was running the Eagle Academies. And just because of what the Eagle Academies represent, there is a sensitivity to the way law enforcement will be or not be brought into schools. I don't think we're going to see schools being treated like jails. We're not going to see schools being like fortresses. They're going to try to take the stigma away from a school with metal detectors, treating kids like criminals while they're going to school. At the same time, of course, trying to keep them safe, but trying to find a way that they're kept safe and not criminalizing them at the same time. So I think it's going to be interesting to find where and how that's going to be done. But there's going to be a different sensitivity to it with David there, because he has seen what educating Black males and males of color in general can be done, and how it can be done successfully. He said, I think he threw out the number 38% was the graduation rate. He didn't throw out what the graduation rate is for the Eagle Academies. It is up there in the high 90s. I dare say, I think it's like 98% or something, even maybe 100. I mean, it is phenomenal. I mean, he is making sure that those kids graduate and they're going to college and they're successful. And, when I asked him that question at the beginning, did you ever dream that you would be here? And he said, yes. And he's instilled dreams in the kids that go to his schools. And that's one of the things that our young people are missing. They're missing that dream. I remember when I was a kid, someone would ask me what I wanted to be, and I would rattle off 10 different things, because I was taught that I could be anything I wanted to be when I grew up. And I remember asking some kids a few years ago what they wanted to be when they grew up, and they didn't have any clue. They weren't dreaming anymore. They didn't have aspirations anymore. They just were so beat down by what was going on around them. And we need our schools, our politicians, and everyone around our kids to rally around them and help them understand that they still can be everything or anything they want to be. But we've got to help them with that. And I think someone like David at the helm is going to help them realize that their dreams can come true if, number one, they have them, because you have to reach for something to attain it. And number two, you got to have people to support you. And he's one of those people that's going to be able to support them.
I mean, we have a thing in this country called school to prison pipelines, which is just insane to think about that. Aswad, I know you are more than just the associate editor of the Houston Defender. You are also in ministry, and you've done a lot more than just be a reporter. What do you think it takes to break something like that, to break that school to prison pipeline? And the Houston Defender just recently covered a story how the University of Houston did a whole seminar and discussion on this. But what do you think it's going to take to snap that? And it sounds like David is committed to breaking that pipeline.
It takes leaders like David. It takes the Black press to live up to its calling and its challenge, and it takes a community effort. We did several articles actually on the adultification of Black girls in K-12 education, because when folk talk about the school to prison pipeline, oftentimes they focus on Black boys, which is a crime, a sin and a shame what's happening to Black boys, but the same thing is happening to Black girls. That whole adultification thing where teachers and school administrators and law enforcement look at little girls, little Black girls, assume that they're older than they are, assume that they are more worldly than they are, and give them harsher punishments for committing the same, schoolyard offenses as their white counterparts. So it's going to take a community effort. It's going to take, the schools and leaders who care. It's going to take the elected officials to put their money where their mouth is. And it's going to take parents and just community members to recognize that, if something's going wrong with your child, then it's going to affect me as well. And I have to say this about Houston real quick. I've had the honor of living in multiple cities, and I've never seen the Black progressive organizations in any city work together like they do in Houston. Usually, they're in a pissing contest or, whatever, but here in Houston, there's been a long tradition of these more progressive organizations working together. And I think that bodes well for us fighting back against some of these challenges, like the whole, in Texas, in April of 2020, I believe it was, the state of Texas miraculously gave the okay for African-American studies to be taught in high school as an elective. And shortly after that, you saw a barrage of attacks on Nicole Hannah-Jones' 1619 project. You heard the former president talking about, well, we need a 1776 project, as if white history hasn't been celebrated enough. And then all the attacks on critical race theory, where they lump anything and everything Black under, that umbrella. And so we have some articles that are, coming out real soon now that talk about, well, last year, the state said, African-American studies can be taught. Now, is it being taught or not? And so we're excited about that coming out. But your question was, what do I think needs to happen? I think everyone, community, school leaders, politicians, they all need to really we need to put our money where our mouth is and make this thing happen, and not settle for anything less. Not settle for anything less.
Well, with the time that we have left, no, I didn't mean to cut you off there, Aswad. Did you want to say something?
I'm a minister and I forgot to say the faith community. Lord have mercy. Please forgive.
Well, with that, with the time that we have left, typically people like to go and prognosticate about what's going to happen in 2022. And I'm not a big prognosticator. So no predictions. But what I would ask though, Ellie and Aswad, what are you both committed to into 2022 in terms of the reporting that you've been doing, both at the New York Amsterdam News and at the Houston Defender, and in particular, the work that we've been doing around education? So Aswad, I'll start with you and then I'll have Ellie give her closing thought.
Most excited about our focus on solution journalism. Sinceria Messiah Giles, our publisher, has always told us if we're writing a story, it needs to be news our people can use. And we're trying to take that to another level. So providing solutions, not just talking about the issues or the problems, but what can we do about it. I'm most excited about that. And the reporting that we're going to do on the challenge to democracy, the challenge to our votes and our voices in the battle that has taken place here in Houston and here in the state of Texas. And we're ready for the fight.
Thank you, Aswad. Ellie?
Yeah, like Aswad, solutions journalism is paramount to all the work that we're doing, because we can't just report on everything anymore. We've got to provide solutions as well. And one of our fellow publishers asked a question in the chat, and she asked, about dreams, and she said, but when they're 12 and older, their dreams die, and what they see happening around them kills their dreams. What can we do to keep their dreams alive? And I think as newspaper publishers and editors and writers, I think part of our role is to make sure that they see that their dreams can live. And in the reporting that we do and the stories that we write, in the talks that we give, we have to promote the fact that their dreams can live on, and that they can be successful, and that they will be successful. And we have to be the role models when they don't have role models. We have to find them the role models when they need them. And we have to promote the people that are those role models, and we have to showcase them. We have to show the people that make a difference in our communities, and we have to continue to highlight those people, because other people are just not doing it enough. They're showing those people that may be on TV and maybe politicians and those that everyone has heard of, and the pop stars and the athletes. But we're the ones that can show the folks in our community that are everyday people that are doing extraordinary things. Those are the role models that our kids need to see. Those are the people that we need to be writing about in our communities. Those are the people that lift up our communities and that hold up our communities and the shoulders that we've all stood on. And by us making sure that we cover our communities, those show our kids that there are hopes and dreams and people that they can aspire to be, and that will lift them up continuously. So with that, what we're going to continue to do is what we've done for 112 years, is to report on our communities, report on the people that are making a difference, and tell our stories, and to help find solutions to the problems that are plaguing us, and tell everyone about the people that are making a difference in helping fight the problems and saving lives. And thank you so much for having us here today.
Well said. Aswad, something you wanted to say?
I just wanted to add one thing real quick, because I'm listening to Ms. Tatum, and I'm thinking she needs to be writing about herself, and Ram Sammy needs to be writing about himself, and Sincere Messiah Giles, because if you think about Mamie Till, making that decision to have the funeral of her son Emmett Till, an open casket funeral, a powerful, courageous decision. But so too was the decision by Black editors, Black publishers, to publish that picture. And if you look at, there are several icons in Black history that point to the day when they saw that picture in Jet magazine, that put their lives on a whole different trajectory. They were, in their minds, whatever they were going to do, they were going to be dedicated to making this world better for Black people. But that was because of a decision that the Black press made. We're going to run this story because our people need to see it. And so I am with you 1,000%. And we need to be writing that article, that book on Ms. Tatum and Ms. Giles and all the other editors across the country.
Well, it takes a village, right? And there are 10 publishers that are involved in this Word in Black collaborative. 2 of them that joined us tonight. Aswad, thank you so much for joining us. And Elinor, thank you for joining us. And Elinor, thank you for inviting David Banks We invited David before it was officially announced that he was going to be incoming chancellor for the New York City schools. And now we were able to share that, his story, his testimony for what he's about to do. But there's more to come. So the conversation does not end here. We would love for you to join us on social media and on Twitter at Word in Black. If you can follow us, share some love, tweet tonight's event. We'll have a recording of this video shared within the next day or two. Also, be sure to sign up for our newsletter, which you can find at wordinblack.com, and click on the newsletter button there. And then also, if you were moved by tonight's event, this is not work that comes for free. It takes a village. So we are very thankful for our support from the Chan Zuckerberg initiative, but you can also be a part of the solution too by making a donation. And it is that time of year when we ask everyone to think about making a donation as the calendar year comes to an end. So you can go to wordinblack.com, click on the donate button, and make a donation of your choice for as little as $5